Let's talk about Black history, but not the version in textbooks, not the one that starts with chains, not the one that begins in 1619. Tonight, we're talking about something older, deeper, uncolonized. We're talking about Black genetics because before there were borders, before there were slave ships, before there were categories called race, there was Africa. And in Africa, there was the beginning of humankind. Science tells us something powerful. Modern genetics confirm what anthropologists, archaeologists, and evolutionary biologists have documented for decades. All modern humans trace their ancestry back to Africa. The out of Africa theory isn't political, it's genetic. Studies of mitochondrial DNA, which is passed from mother to child, point to a common maternal ancestor, often referred to as mitochondrial Eve, who lived in Africa approximately 150,000 to 200,000 years ago. Y chromosome studies tracing paternal lines tell the same story. Africa is not a sidebar in history. It is the foundation. And here's the part they don't emphasize enough. African populations contain the greatest genetic diversity on Earth. Why? Because humanity has been on that continent the longest. The longer a population exists in one region, the more genetic variation it accumulates. That means Africa genomes hold the deepest archive of human biological history. Black genetics is not narrow, it is expansive, it is complex, it is foundational. Now let's dismantle something. Race, as we use it socially, is not a precise biological category. Genetically speaking, humans are all about 99.9% identical. The differences that do exist, skin tone, hair texture, and certain facial features, are adaptations to environment over thousands of years. Melanin, that's adaptation. Protection against intense ultraviolet radiation near the equator. Skin tone is geography written on the body. It is not hierarchy, it is biology. And here's what geneticists have consistently found: there is often more genetic variation within so called racial groups than between them. Let that sit. The categories we fight over were constructed socially, politically, and economically. They were used to justify enslavement, colonialism, scientific racism, eugenics. But genetically, humanity is a spectrum. And Black people, in particular continental Africans, represent the widest range of that spectrum. Let's talk about traits because genetics has been both weaponized and misunderstood. Take that sickle cell trait. For years, it was framed as a Black disease. But sickle cell trait is actually an evolutionary adaptation to regions where malaria was prevalent. It appears in parts of West and Central Africa, but also in parts of the Mediterranean, the Middle East, India. Why? Because malaria doesn't care about race, it cares about geography. The trait provided partial protection against a deadly disease. That's not weakness, that's adaptation. Now consider lactase persistence, the ability to digest milk into adulthood. Many Northern European populations developed this trait because of pastoral lifestyles. But that doesn't make one population superior. It reflects environmental necessity. Genetics reflects survival strategies. not value systems. We cannot talk about Black genetics without addressing the harm. In the 18th and 19th centuries, pseudoscientific racial hierarchies were built using distorted interpretations of biology, cranial measurements, phrenology, eugenics. They claimed intelligence could be measured by skull size. They ranked races in a hierarchy with whiteness at the top. None of it stood up to modern genetics. None of it. But those ideas shape policy, segregation, sterilization programs, medical experimentation. And that's why this conversation matters. Because when we talk about Black genetics today, we must reclaim it from misuse. Here's another truth. For decades, medical research disproportionately centered European ancestry populations, which means diagnostic tools, medication dosages, and risk assessments were often calibrated to non diverse genetic datasets. That has consequences. When Black populations are underrepresented in genomic research, health disparities widen. Precision medicine requires precision data. And Africa, again, holds the most genetically diverse populations on the planet, which means inclusive research isn't charity, it's scientific necessity. Black genetics isn't a footnote in medicine, it is essential to understanding humanity's biological range. Now let's shift to something deeply personal: DNA testing, ancestry tracing, the African diaspora. For many Black Americans whose genealogical records were severed by slavery, genetic testing has become a bridge. It reconnects families to regions in West Africa, to ethnic groups, to migration patterns. It does not erase history, but it offers pieces of it back. Genetics can't tell you your full story, but it can tell you your story did not begin in bondage. It began in civilizations, in empires, in agricultural innovation, in astronomy, in mathematics. Your DNA carries more than trauma, it carries antiquity. There is no single Black gene, no uniform genetic code. Africa alone contains thousands of ethnic groups, hundreds of languages, deep genetic variation between regions: East Africa, West Africa, Southern Africa, and North Africa. The diaspora adds layers: Caribbean, Brazil, the United States, Europe. Black identity is cultural, historical, political. Genetics is part of the story, but it is not the totality, and it certainly is not a stereotype. Black history is not just social struggle, it is biological endurance, it is evolutionary depth, it is the oldest branch of the human family tree. When we teach Black history, we must teach that Africa is not a marginal player in civilization. It is the cradle of humanity. When we discuss identity, we must separate social constructs from genetic reality. When we address health disparities, we must advocate for inclusive genomic research. And when someone tries to distort science to rank human worth, we answer with evidence, with clarity, with scholarship. Black genetics tell us something undeniable. We are not an anomaly. We are not a deviation. We are not a footnote. We are foundational. Before borders, before empires, before racial categories, there was Africa. And from Africa, humanity. That is not politics. That is biology. and biology tells the truth. If you're here for Black history that is grounded in scholarship, evidence, and unapologetic clarity, stay, because we are not shrinking this conversation. We are expanding it, and we are just getting started.